Okay, so I've finished my recording session here. I hit stop and I can turn off the record enable and I can unmute it and I can listen to it. Okay. And so now it has named it something that's rather robotic. I want to right click on it, add right click on it, hover over the name and rename it, and I'll just call it source. You might have multiple sources or take one or inside and outside, but now I'll recognize it that way. I also want to name the track source. Okay, so now I'm going to go shopping for interesting clips to take out of my whole recording session here. And so that one was okay. That was a little bit more resonant. That one was more interesting. And so let me capture this little miniature gesture here, or large motif, however you want to call it. And so I'm going to use my range selection side of my smart tool and swing from left to right here. And I can afford to be a little sloppy at this stage. I'm going to use the copy and paste commands. So Command C, and then I'll select a new track and say so I'll select this. Don't have to be too precise. I'll show you why in a bit. And I'll hit Command C to copy, and then I'll just move down to another track here and place vertically and horizontally where I want to put it. And I'll just click there and hit Command V to paste, and it shows up right there. So this is going to be, so the source track we want to leave alone so we can always go back to it. This next track, let's call it something like original clips. These are going to be the parts that we might also want to go back to, and we'll make other changes to them later on a different track. But these are the regions that we've pulled out from our source region. And so, yeah, the reason why we use this word region is that it's not actually the sound file, especially because if I delete it, it doesn't go away. It still exists in my recording session here. I'll undo it so this region comes back. What a region really is a window into a sound file. It's peering into a part of a sound file, and so we can see if we hover over the left side, we can zoom in on, we can limit it to just part of it. So it's just a view on that sound file. That also means, look at this. This is why we didn't have to be so precise when we did our copying and pasting earlier. Because now we can go in and adjust things in either direction. And so I want to cut out any extraneous space at the beginning and at the end. It looks like that last little attack might be useful here. And so I'm going to temporarily, let's see, I could mute the source track so that I only hear this track when I play it. But I also, if I have a bunch of tracks that I would want to mute, and I only want to hear this one or just a couple tracks, I could do the converse of muting all those other tracks, and I could just solo this track. Notice if I click the S button, all the other ones are temporarily muted. Let me see if I hear that last tap. Nah. So I'll cut it off like that. Okay, I don't think I'm missing anything after that. And so next, before we leave this sound, we want to, we don't want any sudden cutoffs, and the edges of a region are going to suddenly cut off. So we always want to add some sort of fade in here no matter how small. Normally, I recommend something like 20 milliseconds. It should be enough to be safe, but still seem pretty instantaneous. Okay, so let's undo any soloing here. Remember, if you can't hear something, check your mute settings or solo settings. Also check your volume faders. Those might be ways where something is off. So let me get one more, and let's see what was going on here. It looks like an interesting shape. Oh, that was our bottles. Let me see if I can find, oh, what are these? Well, let's see. This could be. I like that this is erratic and it has varying levels of loudness. That could be useful for us later. So I'm going to take that and copy, and remember to place your cursor and click away, and then do your paste. And let's go for one more. I think this is the crumbles. Yeah. So I would probably want to capture all of that that's the same, but for the sake of convenience, I'm just going to capture this much of it and do paste. Okay, so now that I've got my clips selected out from my source, I can mute my source. I can actually delete this if I want to, but unless you really need the space back, it's fine to just leave your source there and just leave it muted. You can always go back to it. And let's see. I'm going to I want to collect all these all these sounds so that they're together. And so I don't have any especially good ways to do that, but I'll drag them all toward the front and use some copying and pasting. So I've got all my original source clips here, and I can go shopping for I can go shopping back to. I've got them here for reference in case I ever want to go back to the pure, unaltered original clip. Oh, and for each of these, I've don't forget to trim and fade the beginnings and ends. Just to be safe, because when a sound cuts off suddenly, a sudden change from something that's non-zero to something that is zero is going to be a straight line, right? That's going to be a very sharp edge. It's going to sound like a click, an instantaneous burst of noise, like that. And so that could really soil something nice. So remember to trim extraneous space and do our fades. Now, once we've got this is basically our repertoire, our vocabulary. And if we want more sounds or more variations of the sounds, we can go in and back to our source and get more. But for right now, this is our vocabulary. So what I'm going to do is select this track and then hit Command A to select all. And what I want to do is do an auto zoom feature that we call normalizing. We saw that mentioned at the export stage. What normalizing does is, and it's the same as normalizing for any other set of data if you've encountered this before, but it looks at the maximum value and it scales every value in the sound file so that the maximum value is the maximum possible value. And so it means it turns it up as much as it can, makes it as loud as possible without clipping. And so with all these regions selected, we're going to go to the region menu and the gain submenu, and normalize is buried under here. And so it'll bring up this dialog box. Normalizing to 0 decibels is fine. That's the maximum. That's the maximum loudness that it can represent. And So I'll just leave that the way it was. Here, I want to normalize each region based on its own peak value. So without considering the peak values of other files. And so I'll click normalize, and you'll see some of them actually got smaller because they were dipping into the red a bit, and it saved a safety margin so that we could dial it back later. Other sounds that were very quiet would get big. Like, let's see if I captured this sound and put it here. This one, if I select it and normalize it, will get rather large. And let's keep this one. Let me zoom in on it a bit. Oop. Let me put my play cursor here and zoom in on it. And let's give it a nice attack and a longer decay. It's really just noise, but I can get that much out of it. And yeah, we'll give it a nice longer fade at the end and a very short fade at the beginning. Let's see what that sounds like. Remember, we've got our source track muted, so we'll only hear this one. Okay, maybe I want this to start a little more suddenly. Okay, I like it. I'll hit return so I can go back to the beginning. Okay, now notice that it's labeled each of these in not so helpful a way. And so let's click on each of these, and we can either right click and hover over the name and pick rename, or we can notice that the keyboard shortcut here is Control 9. So I'll just click on it and say Control 9, and what was this one? This is bottle. And so maybe I'll just call it bottle taps so that I know it's multiple bottle taps. And we see it change there. And we'll pick this one, Control 9. This is our, let's see, that was banging on the coaster. So yeah, I'll call it coaster taps. Here's our crackling. Maybe I'll say this is crackle and then a modifier afterwards. So crackle long as opposed to crackle short. And what about this one? Well, it's noisy or hissy. It's still got a thump. Maybe I'll just call it thump hiss. Okay, now we want to lock in these changes that we've made to these sounds. So I'm going to do one more thing and export them as their own sound files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click to highlight each region, and then the slow way is to right click and then hover over the name and then pick export down here. But also notice Command Control E is the shortcut for exporting. And so I can just click it and not worry about any of this stuff and just click export. And that was bottle taps. And look, now it made a file named bottle taps. And so I can do that here. And if I remember my keyboard shortcut, all I have to do is click it and then Command Control E and then hit enter. And click it, Command Control E, enter. And this one might be, well, yeah, there we go. Command Control E and enter. And then we look and see, okay, we've exported all of these sounds. And so I might want to, at this point, make a folder, a new folder here for myself. Let's see, make a new folder. And maybe just call it sounds. And maybe I'll move these in there.